So Eddie Jaku is the subject of our conversation today. The book that we're talking about is The Happiest Man on Earth. I took some time in publishing this episode because I was enchanted by the amount of gratitude he displayed as a human being.
My dear new friends.
With a ready smile and a twinkle in his eye, a man of indeterminate age holds his audience spellbound.
I was at the bottom of the pit, so if I can make one miserable person smile, I'm happy.
A Holocaust survivor's pleading for gratitude and generosity for humankind. This book has really taught me to live in the gratitude of the moment. This is the Mind Podcast, Episode 7. My name is Helen Garcia. Anger leads to fear, which leads to hate, which leads to death. Many from my generation raise their children with the shadow of this hatred and fear. It does your children no good to teach them to be afraid. This is their life. They should celebrate every minute of it. You brought them into this world. You must support them, help them, not push them down with negative thinking. This is an important lesson that we survivors must understand. If you are not free in your heart, don't take away your children's freedom. I always tell my children, I brought you into this world because I wanted to love you. You owe me nothing but that. All I need from you is your affection and respect. This is what I'm proud of. My family is my achievement. Eddie Jaku was born in 1920 in Leipzig, Germany. His family had been taken to Auschwitz. He had spent a few years of his life in hiding with his family in Brussels, and he was also taken to a concentration camp and escaped from Buchenwald concentration camp and spent years in Auschwitz. He says, "What a miracle to be alive and to hold my beautiful baby, my beautiful life, my beautiful wife. If you had told me while I was being tortured and starved in the concentration camps that soon I would be so lucky, I would never have believed you. In time, my wife became much more than my wife. She became my best friend. Love saved me. My family saved me. Here is what I learned. Happiness does not fall from the sky. It is in your hands. Happiness comes from inside yourself and from the people that you love. And if you are healthy and happy, you are a millionaire." There's so much pain that comes with encountering suffering when you're actively hated by the very country that you were raised in. Eddie was born a proud German citizen. His father raised him to be part of the community. They gave back to the community, but they soon experienced a lot of persecution. At 12 years old, he couldn't go to school. He was expelled for simply being Jewish. And so his father gave him the fake pseudonym of Walter Schleif, giving him a fake identity card so he could spend the next 5 years from 13 to 18 going to school with this false identity to become an apprentice under a mechanical engineer. He carried a lot of pain over the years, and to illustrate the point that he was a proud German, I want to read page 7 of the book. "My father was a proud German citizen as could be, an immigrant from Poland who settled in Germany. He first left Poland as an apprentice in fine mechanical engineering for typewriting manufacturing Remington. Because he spoke good German, he made his way to America working on a German merchant ship. He excelled in his trade in America, but missed his family and decided to travel back to Europe to visit on another German merchant ship, arriving just in time to be caught in the First World War. Because he was traveling on a Polish passport, he was interned by Germans as an illegal alien. However, the German government recognized that he was a skilled mechanic and allowed him to leave internment to work in a factory in Leipzig, making heavy weapons for the war effort. In this time, he fell in love with my mother, Lena, and with Germany, and stayed after the war. He opened a factory in Leipzig, married my mother, and soon I was born. 2 years later, we welcomed my little sister, Joanna, into the world. We called her Henny for short. Nothing could shake my father's patriotism and pride in Germany. We considered ourselves Germans first, Germans second, and then Jewish. Our religion did not seem as important to us as being good citizens of our Leipzig. We practiced our traditions and observed our holidays, but our loyalty and our love were for Germany. I was proud to come from Leipzig, which had for 800 years been a center for art and culture. It had one of the oldest symphony orchestras in the world. For centuries, Jews had been part of the very fabric of Leipzig society. Since medieval times, the big market day was on Friday rather than Saturday, to allow Jewish merchants to participate, as work is forbidden for us on Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath. Prominent Jewish citizens and philanthropists contributed to the public good, as well as the Jewish community, overseeing construction of some of Europe's most beautiful synagogues. Harmony was part of life, and it was a very good life for a child. So as the beginning of the book goes on, it paints this picturesque image of how beautiful German society was, how intellectually driven, how great it was to its citizens. And after 1920, while Hitler was coming into the political arena, you start to see a divide between Germans and Jewish folks. Eddie's family practiced hospitality as part of Sabbath, and this allowed him to witness his father's hospitality. They were a big part of his life. And one day, he says, he turns up and was informed he could no longer attend school. I was being kicked out for being Jewish. This was unacceptable to my father, a stubborn man with powerful connections in Leipzig, who soon devised a new plan for my education. "Don't worry," he said to me. "You will continue your studies. I will make sure." False papers were prepared for me, and with the help of a family friend, I was enrolled at Jeter und Scherer, a mechanical engineering college in Tuttlingen, far from the south of Leipzig. This was the epicenter of engineering technology in the world at that time, supplying the world with precision mechanics. I was enrolled under the assumed name of Walter Schleif, a Gentile German prophet who had less to fear from Hitler's appointment as German Chancellor. Walter Schleif was the identity of a real German boy who had vanished. Most likely his family had quietly left Germany when the Nazis began to rise. My father obtained his identity cards and was able to modify them into forgeries that were convincing enough to fool the government. German identity cards at the time had tiny photos embedded in the paper, which could only be seen with a special infrared light. The forgery had to be very well done, but my father's vocation in typewriters meant he had access to the right tools and the know-how. So very quickly in the book, you start to see that his identity of being Jewish leads to discrimination in his education, discrimination in what he wants to do, and the stubbornness of Eddie's father allows him to go to school. And what I really admire about the start of the book is that Eddie acknowledges the power of his parents. In 1938, he says, just after my 18th birthday, I sat my final exams and was selected as the top apprentice of the year for my school and invited to join the union. The unions in Germany at that time were not the same as you find in modern society, and how much money you made, and were more about what you were able to do as a practitioner. So it doesn't really matter in the school that he's going to how much money he has. It matters more about the skill and about the trade. Mind you, his father gets him into one of the best mechanical engineering schools that Germany can offer through his connections. Within the union, concerns like class and creed had no importance next to the prestige of the work itself. It was truly a great honor for me to be admitted so young. At the ceremony, I was called up in front of everyone to accept the commendation from the master of the Precision Engineering Union, who was dressed in the traditional fine blue robe with an elaborate lace collar. Today, we accept the apprentice, Walter Schleif, into one of the finest unions in Germany, announced the master. I burst into tears. The master shook me. What's wrong with you? This is one of your finest days. You should be proud. But I was inconsolable. I felt terribly sad that my parents couldn't be there to see me. I wanted so badly for them to see what I had achieved, wanted, too, for my master to understand that I wasn't the poor orphan Walter Schleif. I was Eddie Jaku, that I had a family who loved me, and it hurts so much to be far from them. I treasure every piece of knowledge those years gave me, but I will always regret that time spent far from my family. Truly, my father was wise when he told me a life is worth more than a bank account. There are many things in this world that no amount of money will buy you, and some things priceless beyond measure. Family first, family second, and family last. So throughout this entire book, one of the things that I'm continually surprised is how young Eddie was when he experienced discrimination and persecution as a Jewish man, to the point where he had to hide his very identity to even go to school. This is an important detail because it really captures how he relished the small moments. That when you're suffering and you're going through extreme moments of persecution, there are times where you have to hide the truth of what people know and what people don't know. But the beauty of it in the suffering is he chose to give thanks to what he already had and the things that he already experienced. He learned to hyper-index on moments of gratitude as opposed to dwelling on things he could not control. In this situation, he couldn't really see his family. He was sent away to another town to get an education. And there are times where you need to make sacrifices in moments of extreme pain in order to make it through. And he made his mission to make his father proud. Maybe you don't have the best relationship with your parents or your father or your mother, but what's important to highlight here is that gratitude can move us forward. There are moments where we ruminate so much on things that we cannot control that we lose sight on what we do have control over. He gets captured at 18 years old. He misses his parents. He takes a train back to Leipzig and unfortunately gets taken to Buchenwald. Long story short, he ends up escaping from Buchenwald, but he finds out that the political situation in Germany has gotten worse. For the guards who persecuted us, discipline was more important than common sense. If a soldier is told to march, they will march. If they are told to shoot a man in the back, they will do it, and never question it if it is right or wrong. The Germans made a religion of logic, and it turned them into murderers. Quickly, many saw death as a better alternative to life in Buchenwald. I knew a dentist, Dr. Cohen, who was beaten so badly by the SS that his stomach ruptured and he began to die a slow, agonizing death. He paid 50 marks, about a week's wages, for a smuggled razor blade. A man of science, he calculated exactly which arteries he needed to cut and how long it would take him to die. He made a plan to sit on the lavatory right in the middle at exactly the right time so that he would have 17 minutes before a guard came, which is how long he'd calculated he would need to lose enough blood to die. Then he would fall into a toilet so they couldn't pull him out, or they would wash him off, sew him up, punish him, and tell him, "You die when we want you to die, not before." This poor man succeeded in his grim mission. He escaped the Nazis on his own terms. So Eddie really witnessed the suffering of the Jewish people. Sometimes some of the things that I'm going to read you in this book are not child-friendly. They're pretty gruesome. And he went through so many beatings. And yet, what I really admire about this book is throughout his stay in Buchenwald and in Auschwitz, he found ways to develop relationships with other people, to stay human, to stay a person. There are things that benefited him from his father's teachings. In specificity, his dad really highlighted the importance of knowing how to work with your hands and specializing in something that's going to move the world forward. Eddie specialized in mechanical engineering, which got him out of Buchenwald and allowed him to escape. And that's the very thing that actually allowed him to survive in Auschwitz. I think a really great lesson from this book is find something that only you can do. And from there, develop relationships with other people in order to maintain a sense of humanity when going through a really hard time. So after he escaped from Buchenwald, I think it's important to note that his family was able to escape and go to Brussels for a very short time. They lived together in an attic, and Eddie said, "We had to think about safety all the time. My father covered the entrance to one of the rooms with a false wall and put planks outside the windows so we could run from one roof to the next if the police came. There was another Jewish building next door. One day, the parents were taken and the children had nowhere to go, so we took them in as well. It was cramped and sometimes uncomfortable, and I was working my fingers to the bone, but he called it the most cherished and happiest moments of his life." Again, the perspective taking and the looking back is a true testimony of how much he prioritized community and togetherness. That because of what he'd been through, he didn't choose to focus on the lack or the lack of space. He chose to focus on the privilege of being with his family. And I just am impressed continually about how he takes the things that people don't notice, and he's able to geniusly find ways to work with what he has. When he gets taken to Auschwitz, for example, he sees a lot of opportunity to be found in the waste of the camp. He says, for example, when the carpenters' hacksaws became blunt, they would throw them out. Instead of wasting that precious steel, I would collect them and grind away the teeth to create beautiful knives and then carve polished timber handles for them. I would sell them for clothes or for some food or soap, both to other prisoners, like those who worked in Canada and had valuables to spare, and to civilians. Canada is in K instead of C. There were many civilians in Auschwitz, the cooks, the drivers, German or Polish. They were just there to survive the war like anyone else. From them, I would take commissions for custom creations. I would use the machinery at the factory to make rings for their sweethearts, engrave them with initials. I would trade a gold steel ring for a shirt or a bar of soap. One day I found a big pot and a hole in it, and it had been thrown out. I had the idea, so I patched it up and took it back to the camp. He's so crafty. He was able to trade some of the steel parts for 4 raw potatoes, was able to cook it. He is really grateful to his friend Kurt, who survived both the Buchenwald camp and survived with him at the Auschwitz camp. He says, "Thanks to my friend Kurt, I survived. We looked after each other. When one of us was injured or too sick to work, the other would find food and help the other. We kept each other alive. The average survival time of a prisoner in Auschwitz was 7 months. Without Kurt, I wouldn't have made it half that far. When I had a sore throat, he cut his scarf in half and gave me one so I could recover. People saw us wearing the same scarf and assumed we were brothers. We were that close. Each morning we would wake up, and before work we would walk around the blocks and talk to keep our spirits up. We would hide little presents for each other behind a brick I had carved out in the toilet wall, soap, toothpaste, pieces of rags. These moments of friendship and gratitude were necessary to survive that inhumane place Hitler created." Again, gratitude coming up. I think it's important to note here that before even knowing that Kurt was in the concentration camp, Eddie was actually found out by the Brussels police. His entire family was found out, and his parents and him were separated. His sister, long story short, survived the camp in Auschwitz, and they stayed close. She lived in Australia, he lived in Australia, but his parents were considered too old. And as they get off the train in Auschwitz, Eddie is watching his parents go away. And if you're listening to this in the podcast, I'm spreading out my hands to just give you a visual of what it was like. He runs after his mom and dad, gets in the line with them, and luckily or unluckily, a German police sees him, the SS sees him, and tells him to go in the other line. He asks the German SS, where are they going? And they said, oh, they're riding the car, you're supposed to walk because you're healthier. That wasn't the entire truth, that was a half-truth. It turns out that his parents actually end up dying that day. They end up getting taken to a gas chamber, and an SS police tells him that's where your parents went after he came to the Auschwitz camp. And so in the middle of all of this, he's grieving the death of his parents, who he didn't even say goodbye to. One of his biggest regrets is that he didn't have the chance to say goodbye to his mother. And he writes in the book, if you have a chance, tell your mom I love you. And he really drives home this perspective of community and family. And so his gratitude for Kurt is really encapsulated through this context, because you learn that he only gets through the entire time in Auschwitz because of the love of community and friends. So I just want to jump to him eventually getting released from Auschwitz. He ends up surviving because of his mechanical engineering skills. And the after part of getting out of Auschwitz is important to talk about, because just because you get out of a really horrible situation doesn't mean it doesn't follow you moments after. It says, I was carrying so much pain. An old family friend in Leipzig visited our long abandoned family home and sent me a box of recovered personal effects. When it arrived, I opened it with shaking fingers and found a trove of our photos and documents. my old legal documents, different identity cards, a book where my father had started paying insurance for me, a workbook from when I graduated as Walter Schleif, many photos of all my loved ones who I would never see again. It was a very, very emotional time. I cried. My sister wouldn't even look at it. She was too upset. It's possible to forget how much pain you carry, how much hurt there is in your subconscious until you are presented with the evidence of everything you've lost, until you are presented with the evidence of everything you've lost. Holding these photos of my late mother, I was struck by the thought that everyone I ever loved was gone and never coming back. And here was proof, a box of memories of ghosts. It was shock. For a long time, I put it away and couldn't bring myself to look at it. I was not a happy man. To be honest, I was not sure why I was still alive or if I truly wanted to live. Looking back, I feel awful for my wife. She had a challenging first couple of years with me. I was just a miserable ghost, and she was a very vivacious person, fully assimilated into Belgian society with many friends from all backgrounds. And I was a quiet and closed off, miserable person, but that all changed when I became a father. About a year after we married, Flora became pregnant. To make enough money to support a family, I took a job with a company that installed operating equipment all around Europe. It involved traveling to a city, installing very specific and intricate machinery for medical operations, and then spending some time training the local staff how to operate and maintain the machine. The moment my eldest son, Michael, was in my arms for the first time, it was a miracle. In that one moment, my heart was healed and my happiness returned in abundance. From that day on, I realized I was the luckiest man on earth. I made the promise that from that day until the end of my life, I would be happy, polite, helpful, and kind. I would smile. From that moment, I became a better person. This was the best medicine I could have, my beautiful wife and my child. I want to just drive home the point that Eddie wasn't happy all the time. Just because he called himself the happiest man on earth doesn't mean he wasn't someone who is also grieving and suffering. And you can have both. You can choose happiness and also still be grieving and not want hatred in your life. And I teach clients this all the time in the work that I do, that multiple truths can coexist at the same time. And what I really love about this perspective is just because he was grieving doesn't mean he stopped living his life. He continued on. He fell in love. He got married. He had a son. And he began to search for new purpose and new meaning. And when we go through grief, sometimes we get so stuck on what we've lost. Not to say that what we've lost has less meaning, but if anything, the more life that we allow ourselves to live, the more purpose and new understanding and new perspective we begin to develop with time. And he goes on to say, your efforts today will affect people you will never know. It is your choice whether the effect is positive or negative. You can choose every day, every minute to act in a way that may uplift a stranger or else drag them down. The choice is easy and it is yours to make. So after his son dies, he realizes that looking outside of himself and having a purpose outside of him allowed him to move on in life. And maybe you're listening to this and you're going through your own sense of grief. And I just want to encourage you to live as much life as you can, because I'm assuming that maybe the person that you've lost or the thing or the situation that you've lost has definitely caused pause in your spirit. But allowing ourselves to learn from these experiences will allow us to grow over time. And life does move on whether we want it to or not. And so that was my understanding and my take from The Happiest Man on Earth. If you really liked episodes like these, please subscribe, please share it with a friend. My name is Helen Garcia. I'm a mental health therapist that's constantly reading books. And I decided to turn my love of books into a podcast because I want it to help as many people as possible. Personally, I've learned so much about how to live life from a place of wisdom, how to live life from a place of humility. I'm far from perfect, but this practice of reading biographies has been a saving grace for me as a child, especially as an immigrant kid. I understand so much of what Eddie is talking about when he talks about feeling like an outsider. There will be a new episode every week. I apologize for taking a 2-week pause. I had family come in, had a lot of family functions, so I wasn't able to dissect a book for y'all, but I'm going to be back on newsletters, and I hope to talk to you next Friday. Thanks, y'all. See you next Friday.
Do not hate anyone. Hate is a disease which may destroy your enemy, but will also destroy you in the process.